Hello, my name is Kevin Boyle. In my first video, I introduced my book, Hit It With a Bigger Hammer, that describes how society manages the prevention of crime and corruption, and it proposes an improved alternative solution. The book exposes policing's failure to prevent crime and proves it cannot prevent crime because its ideology diametrically opposes what is required to prevent crime. I discovered this in corporate security management in New Zealand throughout the 1970s, 80s and 90s, before eventually finding the solution in the 90s, where over a 5-year period it successfully prevented previous multi-million-dollar losses in the company in which it was employed. Change management in that company did not recognize the new innovative solution and reverted back to best international practice, the policing ideology. Predictably, the losses also reverted back to their previous levels. After a brief career in policing, I held an executive security management positions in 3 major New Zealand corporates that each employed thousands of employees. I continually questioned the methods we were using to prevent ongoing internal thefts and fraud in those companies, largely because they kept recurring, not only in general, but in areas where previous offending had been successfully addressed with prosecution. Security became a catalyst in an ever-evolving game of them versus us. My research led me to conclude that the policing ideology employed in business was at odds with commercial aspiration and culture. Whereas commerce is inclusive and nurtures mutual trust and cooperation, policing is mistrusting and polarizes the employees rather than embraces them. This was exacerbated by the fact that the knowledge about offending was with the employees at the coalface, and the only way to access this information or this knowledge was by using spying surveillance tactics that further polarized the employees. I tried alternative ways to access this knowledge but could not get past the code of silence that surrounds offending and protects the offending. This, of course, is a societal code of silence that obstructs policing on a wider scale, with criminals actively invoking their protective status under the code with intimidating threats of violence to warn off informers. Many before have attempted unsuccessfully to break this code of silence, including America's law enforcement agencies, the FBI and CIA. And of course, I had no more success in the initial stages of my research. I will devote a later video to this major inhibitor of social crime management because my solution successfully overcomes it. And in doing so, it can become a powerful tool in future crime management in collaboration with policing. Having been a security manager in 2 major New Zealand corporations, Winstone Limited and Fletcher Challenge Limited, and having experienced the failure of the policing ideology to prevent ongoing offending in those companies, I was provided with the opportunity to establish security management in Carter Holt Building Supplies, later rebranded Carter's. This is a subsidiary of Carter Holt Harvey Limited. After discussing my concerns about security management with Carter's management, I instead proposed an initiative to find an alternative solution that produced better prevention outcomes. John Bentham and Jeff Oakey were progressive, innovative managers who embraced inclusiveness, and they understood my concerns. They agreed to my proposal. However, after many successful and costly investigations and prosecutions, my research repeatedly confirmed those concerns without coming up with an alternative answer. I could not overcome the code of silence. It was then that Mrs. Bentham and Oakey came up with a proposal of their own. They understood what I was trying to achieve and provided me with a unique opportunity to finally find what I was seeking, or if I failed, they were going to install security management in their company. They had made a decision to close one of their biggest branches because it constantly recorded unexplained losses. I had actually carried out an historical investigation at that branch. It had resulted in 2 staff members being prosecuted for theft, and I recalled some tough-minded attitudes. I was not surprised that the branch continued to have loss problems. I was told that the branch was closing in 6 weeks' time unless I could resolve its loss problems and at the same time come up with a credible prevention solution going forward that would be acceptable to all 45 Carter's branches nationwide. Mrs. Bentham and Oakey had made a commercial decision, but their caveat was clever. They were providing me with an opportunity for me to sink or swim, and with the benefit of my previous experience and research with the employees, I knew exactly how to go about achieving the outcome I sought. I convened a meeting with the 43 branch employees, including management. I had been provided full authority and chose to make the closure announcement myself. They were surprised when I told them their branch was closing in 6 weeks' time because it was not profitable, that the company would review their decision to close only if we could resolve the existing shrinkage problem and come up with a prevention solution going forward that would be acceptable to the entire company. I told them 3 of their number had already been made redundant to reduce costs, and the rest of them would be made redundant if we could not resolve these 2 issues. I told them it was more than probable that theft of product was responsible for the losses, and that the offenders were present here in this room. I told them it was these people who were responsible for the branch closure. I told them I would normally conduct an investigation and prosecute those people. I told them I would not be doing that on this occasion because I was looking for a better prevention answer that would avoid this problem in the future. I told them my research indicated that the only way to achieve this was by involving them and gaining their trust and cooperation. I told them the company also believed their inclusion in managing internal theft would achieve better prevention outcomes, and it had provided them with this opportunity to achieve it. I told them what we would firstly have to resolve is the present loss problem before we could discuss prevention methods going forward, and the code of silence around offending was critical to both issues. I told them that not only were the offending employees sitting in this room listening to me, but my research indicated that a large percentage of the people sitting here would have either direct knowledge or peripheral knowledge of their offending. I told them that this knowledge was critical to resolving the loss problem, and it was also critical to any ongoing prevention solution. I appealed to everyone with knowledge of the offending, including the offenders, to come forward to save the branch and everyone's job. I distributed my business cards and told them that any information provided would be treated in confidence. I was prepared for every outcome, the most likely being continued silence. The least likely was the offenders giving themselves up. I was relying on someone coming forward with information. The code of silence is a strong unwritten covenant that is not easily broken, even with the threat of closure and job loss. After 5 days of silence, I had to increase the gravity. I reconvened another meeting and confirmed no one had yet come forward, so closure was more imminent. I told them the offenders were demonstrating a careless disregard for everyone by not coming forward, that they were not affording those protecting them with their silence the same loyalty. I told them it was a very unbalanced and misplaced loyalty, considering the bleak circumstances. I told them I wanted them all to go home and discuss those circumstances with their families. I told them they were also potential victims if jobs were lost, and as such, they also needed to be included and provided the same opportunity to save the branch and the jobs. I was phoned that night by the wife of one of the employees who had told her the circumstances of the branch closure and the impending loss of his job. He had gone to the hotel, leaving my card on the kitchen table, She told me her husband was staunch and would never narc on his mates, but she believed he had left my card out intentionally as a sign for her to call me. She said that most of them at the branch knew what was going on, but they were all the same and would not say anything. However, she said she had noticed a change in her husband's attitude towards the offenders in light of what I was trying to achieve to keep the branch open. She told me that her family could not afford her husband to lose his job, and others were in the same boat. She identified the assistant manager, who was also the transport manager, a yardman and a driver. She told me they had been supplying tradespeople with stolen material for some time. She told me they were still doing it, regardless of what I was trying to do, and this was pissing off her husband and the others. I was surprised the offenders were still stealing in the circumstances, but in the event, it made my job easier to conduct a targeted surveillance over the next 3 days, record their activities, and prosecute them. As part of my ongoing research, I always debriefed the employees, including the offenders, after my investigations. This enabled me to get their honest response to questions around the offending that was already dealt with and where the code of silence was no longer a reason to withhold information. The offenders on this occasion were brutally honest and admitted they kept stealing because they wanted to get as much out before the branch closed. They said they did not believe the branch would be saved, even if they came forward. They also did not believe they would be informed upon by others. But if they were, then so be it. They would accept that. This demonstrated a complete disregard for the welfare of the other employees in the branch, although the offenders did rationalise this by believing the branch would close in any event. The offenders were confident that the code of silence would continue to protect them. They did not consider they were being disloyal to the other employees who showed loyalty to them by their silence. Debriefing with the other employees was equally enlightening, although it confirmed previous research I had conducted. I confirmed that over half of the employees had some knowledge of the offending. I confirmed that they stayed silent because of the code of silence. They said even under the threat of job loss, they remained staunch to the code because no one wanted to be labelled a narc or an informer. They confirmed the social stigma of being labelled a narc was all pervading. They also confirmed my previous research that they did not wish to be responsible for bringing about the punitive consequence of job loss and possible prosecution onto the offenders. And in the event, they did not wish to incur their wrath and possible retaliation. Together with the social stigma attached to informing, these are critical factors that perpetuate the code of silence. I congratulated them for having overcome the first part of the company's criteria for keeping the branch open. The information source remained anonymous, and although she was outside the employee group, I considered her status to be included in the peripheral knowledge category of offending. I told them we now had to achieve the second part of the company's criteria, and if we were going to find a solution to keep the branch open, we would have to somehow overcome the code of silence they obviously felt fervent about. They were sceptical because, notwithstanding the imbalance and unfairness of the recent events, they were still not prepared to narc or inform on others. And even if they agreed to, just to save the branch and their jobs, their agreement could not be conferred upon others who would not be like-minded. This would not be a credible solution for the company to reverse its decision. However, I was not deterred. We had been given this unique opportunity, and together we had achieved the first part of the company's criteria against the odds. I was unsure how the second part might conclude, but I had done all the research and I was not going to forego this final opportunity. I told them it had taken us 2 weeks to resolve the existing issue, and I told them we had 4 weeks now to come up with a credible prevention solution going forward that would cause the company to reverse its decision to keep the branch open and save all of their jobs. Join me in my next video to find out how we did overcome the odds and come up with the solution that not only reversed the company's decision to close the branch and save their jobs, but it was a solution that was acceptable to all employees in the company, and it was adopted by all 45 branches nationwide. I'll see you then.